My name is Matilda Arlen, and I was 39 years old the night I finally understood where I stood in my own family. I had been dreading that dinner all day, the kind of family obligation that sits in your chest like a weight you pretend not to notice until it starts affecting how you breathe. Another gathering at my brother's house. Same table, same forced laughter, same quiet expectation that I would show up, smile, and play my part. I went anyway. I always did. That was my role. The dependable aunt. The one who helped with bills when they fell behind. The one who paid for Cody's phone, his car insurance, even his first apartment so he could say he was independent without actually being independent. I pulled into their driveway already exhausted, not from anything specific, but from knowing exactly how the night would unfold. Inside, the house smelled like overcooked food and cheap wine. My sister-in-law greeted me with a tight smile that never reached her eyes. My brother barely looked up from his phone. The conversation started and died in shallow bursts. Complaints about work, comments about responsibility, subtle remarks about people who don't really understand what it takes to raise a family. No one ever said my name, but I always knew who they meant. Cody was already drinking when I arrived. 18, loud and completely unchecked. Nobody stopped him. Nobody ever did. They called it trust. I called it enabling. He got louder with every glass, telling stories that went nowhere, laughing too hard at himself. The table let him. They always did. Dinner was exactly as lifeless as I expected. Dry lasagna, forced conversation. Then Cody raised his glass. The room quieted, not because he commanded respect, but because everyone wanted to see what he would say. He smiled like he was about to deliver something clever, something important. "To Aunt Matilda," he said, dragging out the words. "The sad aunt who buys love." The silence came first, thick, measured, like everyone was waiting for permission. Then the laughter followed. My brother, his wife, even my sister, shaking her head like it was harmless fun. I didn't speak. I stared at my plate while something inside me quietly shut down. It didn't hurt right away. What hurt was the clarity, the realization that I wasn't misunderstood. I was understood perfectly, and this was what they thought of me. I left without making a scene, drove home in silence, thought about the birthdays I funded, the emergencies I fixed, the money I spent trying to be present. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Cody's phone would be canceled, his insurance gone, his rent finished. Let him feel what happens when the bridge you mock finally closes. That was the night everything cracked, and nobody at that table realized it yet. Sunday came and went, with the kind of quiet that feels loud when you're used to chaos. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel uncertain. I felt clean, like I'd finally stopped bleeding out slowly and had decided to cauterize the wound instead. Cody tried reaching out that afternoon from someone else's phone. No apology, no accountability, just a casual, almost bored message that said, "Can we talk?" Like the humiliation had been a misunderstanding, like my reaction was the only thing worth discussing. I didn't answer. By then, the cancellations were already in motion. His phone line was terminated. His car insurance was gone. The rent payment that had been quietly leaving my account every month was stopped. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was paperwork. It was the kind of consequence that doesn't look emotional on the surface, but changes everything underneath. Monday morning, my brother called, and the second I saw his name on my screen, I knew exactly what kind of call it was going to be. Not an apology, not a check-in, not even a fake attempt at understanding. It was a correction, a reminder, a boundary he thought he was allowed to enforce. He didn't ease into it. No warm-up. No hello that meant anything. He spoke like a manager confronting an employee who had missed a shift. "So you really canceled everything?" He didn't say Cody's name, just everything. Like I'd shut off heat in the middle of winter instead of cutting loose an 18-year-old who had been living like a king on my dime. "Yes," I said calmly. He let out a sigh, that irritated, dramatic sound people make when they want you to feel like the problem without saying it outright. "Jesus, Matilda, don't you think you're being a little petty?" I didn't respond. I wasn't going to justify myself to someone who had been comfortable letting me carry the weight as long as he could call it family. He kept going, and I could hear the smile in his tone, not warmth, superiority, like he believed this was a tantrum that would burn out. "You act like you're some kind of martyr because you throw money around like it makes you better than the rest of us. But at the end of the day, you're still the woman who spends Christmas alone." My stomach tightened, but not because it hurt. Because it finally confirmed something I'd refused to admit for years. He wasn't angry that Cody disrespected me. He was angry that I reacted. "So don't pretend helping out makes you a hero," he said, voice sharpening. "You've just been buying your way into this family since the day Cody was born." I stayed quiet long enough for the silence to make him uncomfortable. I let it sit between us like a mirror. Because the truth was, I had spent the last decade covering for him, and I could count the receipts like prayer beads. He lost his job in 2017. I covered his mortgage for 4 months. When Cody needed braces, I paid half. When they wanted to surprise Cody with a car for his 17th birthday, they came to me with that same rehearsed softness. Just cosign, nothing major. And I did it. I always did it. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was what family does. Turns out they thought I was trying to buy relevance. "I'm done," I said. He scoffed. "Done with what?" "With acting like this is normal," I said. And my voice didn't shake. That was the part that surprised even me. Then I reminded him of the rental house upstate, the 2-unit property we bought together 10 years ago, using a small inheritance from our mother. I had put up most of the money, and he was supposed to handle maintenance while I handled the books. And for years, he had quietly pocketed half the rental income like clockwork, acting like it was his by default. "I'm taking full ownership," I told him. There was a pause, a real one, not theatrical, not performative. The sound of someone realizing the ground they've been standing on isn't solid. "What?" he said, like he couldn't process it fast enough to fight it. "I had my lawyer draw up paperwork over the weekend," I continued. "Buyout offer, notarized, fair price. You can sign it or contest it. Either way, it's happening." He laughed, sharp and forced, the way people laugh when they're trying to bully you back into the role they assigned you. "You're bluffing." "I'm not," I said. "You're really going to cut your own brother out of the only decent investment he has?" he snapped. "Yes." And that was when his voice changed. The arrogance drained out like water. I heard panic slip in underneath the anger, and suddenly he wasn't speaking like a boss anymore. He was speaking like a man trying to hold up a wall that had already started collapsing. Before he could form whatever excuse was coming next, his wife grabbed the phone. She didn't greet me. She didn't soften her tone. She launched into a monologue like she had been saving it for years. She told me I was cruel, that I was embarrassing a teenager who looked up to me, that nobody ever forced me to help, and if I chose to, that was on me. She said I wasn't doing this because of what Cody said, but because I was lonely and bitter and couldn't stand seeing a family that actually loved each other. She kept going, like she was trying to drown me in her certainty. She said I had no kids of my own, so I liked playing parent when it suited me, and pulling out when it didn't. She said if I walked away from them, I'd eventually have no one. I listened to every word. I didn't interrupt. I didn't defend myself, because something in me had finally understood that defending myself was part of the trap. If I argued, they could call it drama. If I cried, they could call it instability. If I begged, they could call it proof. So I stayed calm, and when she stopped for air, I said, "You're right, I won't have anyone, but at least I won't be lied to, used, and laughed at by the people I kept afloat." Then I hung up. The next day, Cody was officially moved out of his apartment. I gave the landlord notice. No screaming, no confrontation, just quiet paperwork that landed like a guillotine. By Friday, he was back under his parents' roof. No car, no phone, no rent money, just a mattress, a secondhand laptop, and the sudden realization that independence isn't a vibe you post online. It's something you earn, and that should have been the end of it. But I could feel it already, even in the silence. This wasn't over yet. The real unraveling hadn't even started. The silence from my brother's house by the end of that week said more than any argument ever could. No angry texts, no guilt-soaked voicemails, just absence. The kind that tells you people are scrambling behind closed doors, trying to rearrange a life that only worked when someone else was holding it together. Cody was back under their roof, and from what filtered through my sister, who still liked to pretend she was neutral, he wasn't handling it well. 2 weeks earlier, he'd been bragging to his friends about never living with his parents again, about adulthood, freedom, independence. Now he was sleeping in the same room he'd grown up in, sharing a wall with the laundry room, getting side-eyed every time he opened the fridge like he was a guest who had overstayed his welcome. I didn't feel bad, not even a little. Consequences only feel cruel to people who've never had any. What I didn't expect was how quickly the next domino fell. Saturday morning, I got a call from the property manager for the upstate rental, the one I was in the process of taking full control of. Her voice was polite but tight, like she was navigating something uncomfortable. She told me my brother had contacted her directly. He'd insisted he was still a co-owner and asked her to ignore any changes I sent over until things were sorted out legally. I didn't argue. I didn't react emotionally. I sent him one message, one sentence. Any further interference, and I'll initiate a formal legal dispute. He didn't respond. That afternoon, his wife called again. This time she sounded different, calm, measured, strategic, like someone trying a new approach after the old one failed. "Look, Matilda," she said, "I think we all got a little carried away. Let's not burn the whole bridge over a joke." That word again, joke. I asked her if she actually understood what I was doing, that this wasn't about Cody running his mouth at dinner. This was about years of responsibility I'd carried without acknowledgement, about the fact that the first time I said no, they treated it like betrayal. She sighed, heavy and rehearsed. "He's your nephew. Don't you want to see him succeed?" "Not if I'm the only reason he ever will," I said. That was when she started crying. Whether it was real or calculated didn't matter to me anymore. The truth had already surfaced, and no amount of emotion was going to push it back down. The rental income meant something very different to them than it did to me. To me, it was passive income, a long-term plan. To them, it had become a lifeline. They had budgeted around it, planned vacations with it, covered emergencies with it, and now it was slipping out of reach. Monday morning, my lawyer sent the final paperwork. Buyout complete, name transfer filed, a clean separation, no more shared investments, no more shared anything. I expected resistance, threats, accusations, another attempt at guilt. Instead, they went quiet. For a few days, it almost felt like peace. Then my sister sent me a screenshot. It was a group chat between Cody and a few of his friends. One message read, "Damn, you really living with your parents again?" Another said, "From solo apartment to sharing a bathroom with your mom. Legendary." Cody hadn't responded. I stared at that screenshot longer than I expected to. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because I understood something he was just starting to learn. Status borrowed from someone else disappears the moment the source dries up. By the second week, the cracks widened. I went to my niece's birthday party. Not because I wanted to, but because my sister begged me to come. I didn't expect my brother to say anything. I didn't expect Cody to show up, but they were both there. Cody stayed quiet, not humbled exactly, more like stalled, like someone who had run out of clever lines and didn't know who they were without them. He stood near the drink cooler, scrolling through a scratched prepaid phone, the kind you buy at a gas station. This was the same kid who used to complain about not getting the newest phone every year. His friends didn't come, not one. Word had gotten around. And at that age, moving back home isn't just inconvenient. It's social extinction. What caught my attention more than Cody was my brother and his wife. They barely spoke to each other. She stayed on the opposite side of the yard. When he asked her questions, where something was, whether she'd seen the kids' shoes, she answered without looking at him, like someone clocking out early from a job they no longer cared about. The fake cheer was gone. You could feel the weight of it all settling into that backyard, the sound of things unraveling quietly. That night, I got a message from my brother. 2 words, "You win." I stared at it for a long time. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like an admission, like he finally understood this was never about a joke or a teenager being careless. It was about dependency dressed up as family. A few hours later, he followed up. "We can't keep up with the mortgage without the rental income. You knew that." I didn't reply. Because no, I didn't know that. And even if I had, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. The safety net was gone. And without it, everything else was starting to fall. I thought the mortgage message would be the end of it. I assumed pride would keep them quiet, that embarrassment would force distance, that the silence would stretch long enough for reality to settle in. I underestimated how dangerous desperation can be when it's mixed with entitlement. A week later, I got blindsided in the most pathetic way possible. Cody showed up at my front door. He was wearing a hoodie pulled too far down over his face and sunglasses that made no sense for the time of day. He didn't knock twice, just stood there, stiff, holding a manila envelope like it weighed more than it should have. I hadn't seen him since the dinner, and up close, he looked different. Thinner, maybe, or just deflated, like someone who had lost something invisible and didn't know how to replace it. He handed me the envelope without saying a word. Inside was a typed letter, not legal, not official, just 4 printed pages, single-spaced, titled in bold like it was trying to sound important, a formal request for support. I actually had to read that line twice to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. He had written in painfully serious language that I had knowingly placed him in emotional and financial distress by abruptly severing support systems that had become foundational to his stability. He used words like abandonment, developmental harm, paternal figure. He said that if I didn't resume financial assistance, he would be forced to pursue other avenues. I flipped to the last page. My brother's name was there too. They had both signed it. I laughed. Not bitterly, not angrily. I laughed out of disbelief. They weren't asking for help. They were staging a moral trial, framing themselves as victims and me as the aggressor for finally stepping away. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't call. I didn't text. Instead, I made a quiet call. A few years back, I had helped one of the HOA board members in my brother's neighborhood during a messy divorce. Loaned him money when no one else would. He remembered. Favors have long memories when they're done without conditions. I asked him one simple question. Was the house in good standing? It wasn't. They were behind on dues. Not dramatically, just enough to trigger warnings, enough to create pressure, enough to expose how close to the edge they really were. The next board meeting, I attended quietly. I didn't speak. I didn't accuse. I just sat in the back while unpaid dues were brought up and documented like any other case. I never mentioned it to my brother. I didn't need to. By Friday, he lost it. He showed up at my house alone this time. No Cody, no buffer. His face was red, not with rage, but panic. He started yelling in my driveway, talking about blood, about family, about how you don't destroy your own over a few mistakes. I waited until he ran out of words. Then I asked him one question. When did you decide that helping you meant owning me? He didn't answer. He just stood there, shaking his head, like someone who genuinely didn't know how we got here. And maybe he didn't. But I did. I watched a family rely on me, laugh at me, then resent me for leaving. And in that moment, I understood something I had avoided for years. I was never really one of them. I was their foundation. And foundations aren't thanked. They're just expected to hold. After he stormed out, everything went eerily quiet. No texts, no emails, no messages filtered through my sister. For the first time in years, nothing tied me to their chaos. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt unfinished, like the story was holding its breath. A month passed. One night, I was at a bar with a friend from college, catching up over drinks that didn't mean anything. He asked if I was still involved in that real estate side hustle upstate. I told him I still had one property, but I'd cut ties with the rest. He frowned. That's weird, he said. I could have sworn I saw a listing under your brother's name. Something in my chest went cold. He showed me his phone. Same address, same house, active listing. And that was when I realized the story wasn't done with me yet. I didn't confront him, not right away. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd been caught before I understood exactly how deep the lie went. When I got home that night, I checked the listing myself. It was real. Same property, same photos I remembered from years ago, different angles, slightly rearranged furniture, but unmistakably mine. The profile listed my brother as the property manager. Cash-only bookings, short-term stays, fully active. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, phone in my hand, not angry, so much as stunned. After everything. After the buyout. After the silence. He hadn't walked away. He'd gone around me. I don't know if it was a key he never returned or a side deal he made with the cleaning service. I don't know how long he'd been doing it or how many guests had stayed there without my knowledge. What I did know was that he'd counted on one thing, that I wouldn't find out. Or if I did, that I'd come to him quietly, emotionally, ready to negotiate my own boundaries down again. So I didn't. I waited 3 weeks. I tracked the listing activity. I saved screenshots of every booking, every review, every date. I let the evidence stack itself neatly, calmly, like bricks. Then I made one final move. One weekend, I drove upstate with a locksmith and a new property manager. The guests inside had checked out that morning. We didn't rush. We didn't argue. We changed the locks, installed cameras, posted a notice on the door stating clearly that any unauthorized entry would result in criminal charges. Then I left. 2 days later, I came back and waited in my car across the street. My brother arrived mid-afternoon. I watched him walk up to the front door, keys already in his hand. I watched his body stiffen when the lock didn't turn. He tried again, harder. Then he stepped back, circled the house, checked the back door. That's when he saw the notice. He stood there for a moment, reading it, shoulders tight. He didn't call me. He didn't text. He just got back in his car and drove away. I haven't heard from him since. Cody didn't fare any better. Last I heard, he'd moved to Phoenix to live with a woman he met online. She kicked him out a month later when she found out he'd lied about having a job. Now he's sharing an apartment with 3 men who work night shifts and argue over whose shampoo is whose. My brother and his wife sold their house quietly, moved to a smaller place outside the city. Less mortgage, less pride, less of everything. I kept the rental, cleaned it up, made it profitable, but more importantly, I made a rule. No family discounts. No, just this once. No unspoken agreements. I still go to the occasional family event. Birthdays, graduations. I bring a bottle. I eat the food. I leave when I'm full. Nobody jokes anymore. Nobody laughs too loud. And every time I see them, I wonder if they remember how it all changed over one dinner and one sentence. The night the sad aunt stopped buying love. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. It had been 8 days since I changed the locks and officially closed the door on the last loose end. I told myself the story was finished. Nothing left to confront. Nothing left to clean up. Life, for once, felt orderly. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, the way I always do now. I didn't feel curious. I didn't feel anxious. I listened later that night, almost out of habit, and had to replay it twice to make sure I'd heard it correctly. It was Cody. His voice was calm in a way that felt unfamiliar, stripped of bravado, stripped of performance. He said he was in town for a couple days and wondered if we could meet for coffee. He said he wasn't asking for anything. No money, no favors, just to talk. I almost deleted it. I don't know what stopped me. Curiosity, maybe, or the quiet instinct that unfinished things don't go away just because you ignore them. We met the next morning at a small coffee shop neither of us had history with. Neutral ground. No memories to weaponize. I arrived early. He came alone. Up close, he looked older. Not wiser exactly, just worn down. Like arrogance had been sanded off one layer at a time until there was nothing flashy left to hide behind. He sat down and didn't waste time. He told me he'd been wrong. That what he said at dinner wasn't a joke, it was a test, a twisted attempt to feel superior for once. He admitted he'd always known I was the one holding everything together, and that made him feel small. So he tried to make me smaller. What surprised me wasn't the apology. It was what came next. He told me he'd recently found out that his mother had used my name and credit on a second rental application for him a year before everything fell apart. She'd reused old paperwork from a lease I once helped them with. Forged a cosigner's signature. When the rent fell behind, it had nearly damaged my credit. I'd never known, never received a notice, never been told. He found out 2 weeks earlier when he applied for a car loan and the bank flagged it. You think you were just the wallet, he said quietly, but it was worse than that. You were the foundation, and we built a whole mess on top of you. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He stood up after that, paid for his coffee, and left. I checked the claim that afternoon. He wasn't lying. The documentation was there. My name. A fake signature. Old files reused like they'd assumed I'd never notice. It's being handled now, legally and quietly. But that was the final truth. Not the joke, not the money, not even the betrayal. It was the silence. The assumption that I'd never matter enough to notice what they were doing to me. Now I do. So here it is. The end of this entire story is simple. They don't get another chance. Not in a year. Not at a funeral. Not when someone hits rock bottom and suddenly remembers my name. I built something on my own, and I'm keeping it that way. No more dinners, no more explanations, no more buying love. And if they ever tell the story of the aunt who walked away, I hope they remember this. I didn't walk away from them. They just never realized I was the only one still standing.